Okay, this was Math Around the Room for Unit 2, Group 1. Okay, it says A is congruent to F. So A and F should be the same measure. If F is 42, A is 42. And B and E are the same, and D and C are the same, so that's 68. And all the triangles, or all the angles in a triangle must add to 180. So I'll make that x degrees. X plus 68 plus 42 equals 180. And we combine like terms, you get x plus 110 equals 180, or x is equal to 70 degrees. So that would be the measure of angle E. The measure of angle E is 70 degrees. For number 2, list all the congruent angle pairs and list all their congruent corresponding sides. So you can basically just look at this. You don't even really need the shape. So for the congruent sides, or congruent angles, you have L and P. Angle L is congruent to angle P. We have N and N, but that's a vertical angle, so we should use 3 letters to name it. We'll have angle PNO is congruent to angle LNM. And then we have M and O are congruent, so angle M is congruent to angle O. For sides, we have LN and PN. So we're going to say that LN is congruent to PN. And we also have that NM is congruent to NO. So NM congruent to NO. And the last one we have L and M, P and O, LM congruent to PO. For 3, we're doing a proof, so we need a statement and a reason. First statement, we're going to say AB congruent to CB. And D is the midpoint of AC. How do we know that? It's given. It's always the first step in your proof. Sorry, I should move down. For 2, so we can mark right away that AB and CB are congruent, so we're going to mark those right here. And now we can say D is the midpoint. So to be a midpoint, that means that these two distances must be the same. So therefore, CD is congruent to AD. And the reason for that is the definition of midpoint. Next, we need to look at our shape. Our shape is being cut in the middle. So if it's being cut in the middle, that's the reflexive property. You're going to say that BD is congruent to BD. And we know that by the reflexive property. And so we're trying to prove that triangles are congruent. So we're going to say that triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CBD. And we have 1, 2, 3 sides. That is the side, side, side theorem. That's group 1. Group 2, we're going to do a 2-column proof. I'm going to do it way up here so that way I can keep the picture in mind. Oops, 1, 1. So 1, you're just going to rewrite all the given stuff. Given. And we get to mark that on our triangle. So WZ congruent to XZ. WZ congruent to XZ. We also have XZY. XZY, that is this angle right here, is congruent to WZY. So that is this angle here. And again, it's being cut down the middle, so we have the reflexive property. So YZ is congruent to YZ. And that is the reflexive property. So we now have enough information to say triangles are congruent, we have triangle WZY is congruent to triangle XZY. And we know that by the side angle side theorem. We have two sides with an angle between them, so it's SAS. And if you get stuck, you don't know if it's SAS or not, just list the side lengths. WZ, and we have YZ. The Z letter is the one that repeats, therefore this angle must be the included angle. If this was the angle that we would pick, we would not have congruence because there is no SSA congruence. Then for 4, our last step was to prove that angles are congruent. Angle X is congruent to angle W, and that is because the corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, number 2. Given that X equals C equals 89. So this is 89 degrees right here. And we have B equals Y, which is 47. So X and C are 89. B and Y are 47. What is the length of BC? So BC is the length that's between the two angles that were given. So if you look in the other part, between the two angles that were given, it tells us that's 6. So BC is actually length of 6. 3. These two sides are congruent and they both point towards these angles. And we don't know what they are, so we'll call them X. All of the angles in a triangle add to 180. So this is going to be X plus 30 equals 180. So that's 2x plus 30 equals 180. Subtract 30 from both sides, and 2x is equal to 150, and divide both sides by 2 to get x equals 75. That's group 2. On to group 3. So group 3, these angles are marked and they point to the congruent sides, like so. So therefore 3x plus 4 is equal to 4x minus 11. Subtract 3x from both sides, add 11 to both sides, and we get 15 is equal to x. Finished. For number 2, we are trying to prove that these two angles or triangles are congruent. I told people not to draw on my paper, but they insist on doing it anyways. Alright. So first things first, if AB is 60 and ED is 60, that means that these two sides are congruent. We are also given that these angles were congruent. So we're going to say that AB is congruent to DE, and that angle A is congruent to angle D by given. Next, this is the bow tie shape. Bow tie shape means that these angles are congruent to each other by vertical angles. So you would say angle BCA is congruent to angle ECD, and that's vertical angles. So for 3, we have two angles and a side. This is angle A that is marked. This is angle C that is marked. Side length AC is not marked. And since it's not marked, that's not ASA. This side's not included. So this must be AAS. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEC. Okay, identify the common angle. So you can see that there's a diamond shape going on right here. anything that's at the point of the diamond is the common angle, so this would be angle C. Moving on. Identify the appropriate theorem. There is only two pieces of information here. Since there's only two pieces of information, this is not enough info. Number 2, tricks a lot of people. They're vertical angles, so these angles are congruent. You would think it'd be SAS. However, these sides are not congruent to each other. We have the bottom sides are congruent, we have the top sides are congruent, but we don't have that they're congruent to each other. So this is actually not enough information. This is the tricky one that gets a lot of people on the test. Next, we have vertical angles, which means these angles are equal, and therefore we have angle side angle. Group 5, same deal. We have the bow tie. Bow tie means that we're dealing with vertical angles. So therefore these angles are congruent to each other. So if we label this A, B, C, angle A is marked, angle B is marked, but side length AB is not marked. Therefore this is not an included side. Therefore this would be AAS. For 2, those are congruent, but we don't have any sides, so this one's not enough info. For number 3, the right angles are a giveaway. This is congruent by the reflexive property, and since this is a right triangle, the hypotenuse is marked, a leg is marked. This is hypotenuse leg. Number 6, or group 6, same stuff. Number 1, reflexive property, so this would be SSS. Again, this is also reflexive property, and this is SSS. You may have gotten confused by there being single marks. That's okay as long as they are all single marks. If it was double, these guys both had double marks, and these guys only had singles, then we'd have a problem. For this part, again, another reflexive property, so we get to mark that off. Now we have angle, side, angle. Group 7. Given these guys, so we're going to separate them into 2 triangles. We're going to do JLM first. So JLM. And then we're going to do NKL, NKL. Okay, so we have the diamond shape here, which means the common angle is L. We can mark angle L by the reflexive property. We're given that LM equals LK, so LM equals LK. We're given that LN is congruent to LJ. Therefore, these two are congruent. So angle J is marked next to the double side, the double marked, no mark over here. So that would be congruent to angle N. So N goes first. L is the common angle, so L's are congruent. And M and K are next to the single mark, so we would put K. And the theorem is side, angle, side. For this one, again, they are overlapping, so let's draw them separate. WYX. And we got ZXY. So we're given WXY. So WXY is congruent to ZYX. We're also given that XWY is congruent to YZX. And here's the thing. Since they overlap right here at XY, XY is a common side by the reflexive property. And therefore this is angle, angle, side. W has 2 marks, so that's congruent to angle Z. Y has no mark, that's congruent to X. And X has 1 mark, that's congruent to Y. That's how you'd get the name right. For this one, 15 points to X, so 15 must also point to X. X plus 36 equals 180. 2x plus 36 equals 180. Subtract 36 on both sides to get 2x equals 144. And divide both sides by 2 to get x equals 72. Ooh, that was close. Okay, that's group 7. 2 groups left. Group 8. Solve for x. First, let's find that missing angle. We know that missing angle, I'll call it y. Y plus 48 plus 84 equals 180. And that's y plus 132 equals 180. And subtract 132 from both sides to get y equals 48. So this must be 48. Since those are congruent angles, they point to congruent sides. So you get 2x plus 10 is equal to 3x minus 1. Solve, subtract 2x from both sides and add 1 to both sides. Whoops. You get 9 equals x. Solved. Number 2 is another proof. So we have statement and reason. Statement, reason. I'm running out of time because class starts in like 5 minutes. So for our reason, we're going to put given. Okay, and you get to mark those on the shape. So wx, xy. Wx, xy. Next, we have V equals Z. So angle V is equal to angle Z. That's also given. Now look at the shape. It's a special type of shape. It is a bow tie. So we're going to mark the vertical angles. So we say angle WXV is congruent to angle ZXY. It should be YXZ, sorry. And that's by vertical angles. So therefore we have angle, angle, side. X is marked, Z is marked, but XZ is not marked. So the side is not included. Angle, angle, side. That's triangle WXV is congruent to triangle YXZ. And we want to prove these sides are congruent. So VW is congruent to YZ. And that's because corresponding parts of congruent angles or triangles are congruent. Group 9, given M is the midpoint. Fail them all. Fail them. Okay, so we're doing a proof. So statement, reason, 1, yada yada yada, given. So we get to mark AB congruent to BC. That's marked for us. Next, we have M is the midpoint. If it's a midpoint, then that means it's equal on both sides. So we're going to say that AM is congruent to MC by the definition of midpoint. Next, we have the reflexive property. It's being cut right down the middle, so BM is congruent to BM. And that is because of the reflexive property. And we have 1, 2, 3 sides marked. So therefore triangle ABM is congruent to triangle CBM by side, side, side. Number 2, this is the remote interior angle theorem right here. So therefore, 30x plus 30 is equal to 15x minus 5 plus 20x plus 10. 30x plus 30 is equal to 35x plus 5. And let's solve this equation. So we get 25 is equal to x, 5x. And divide both sides by 5 to get 5 equals x. So we solved for x, now we got to solve for y. We're going to plug it back in. When you plug x back into this is 15 times 5 minus 5, which is 70. And 20 times 5 plus 10, that's 110. So it's 2y plus 70 plus 110 equals 180. And 2y plus 180 equals 180. Now you might notice something wrong with this. Y equals 0. When you plug 0 back in, it's saying that that's a 0 degree angle. I made a bad problem when I did this originally, so don't worry about it. Good luck studying. Good luck studying for your test. Email me with any questions that you guys might have. And yeah, good luck.